A quick aside before we deal with the Iron Horde. We haven't discussed the Spore Mounds and the Zanger much, but here in the past, the Zanger was still at war with the Overgrowth. In the Prime timeline, the Overgrowth lost this battle, but here they were still resurgent, most visibly demonstrated in the Everbloom. This is a bit of a tricky situation, as the Everbloom was actually an outpost established by Khadgar and the Kirin Tor to help keep the Horde Alliance force resupplied in the Iron War. The problem is, the Overgrowth had overgrown the outpost at this point, and were mobilizing to use those same portals and connection to begin infesting Azeroth. As with Blackrock's Spire some time ago, the commanders were the quickest to mobilize and maneuver to manage this threat. The Overgrowth's greatest weakness was their inability to adapt to change. Nowhere was this greater personified than in Witherbark, who was effectively ignoring everything present. The nearby Botany twins actively were spreading the growth as far and wide as they can, often infesting living beings and replacing their internal organs with plants to control them. A recent victim of this is the Archmagus Sol, whose brain was completely consumed by the spores, which actively sought to use her arcane talents to open the portal that the Janissar Yalnu could utilize. Yalnu believed that Azeroth would be a place where they could spread uncontested. My goodness, were they wrong. The Alliance reached out to the nearby Rengari of the Draenei, while the Horde ended up sort of accidentally stumbling into the Laughing Skull. The Laughing Skull was a clan mostly broken by the Iron Tide, as they refused to sign up, but instead of simply buckling or self-destructing, the Laughing Skull had instead spread out into the wilds to wage guerrilla warfare against the Iron. The majority of the Iron Horde present were Blackrock orcs, under command of Blackhand and his division. They had numbers, but lacked proper defensive fortifications, between Rengari and Laughing Skull assisting Alliance and Horde, and hampered by the ongoing Breaker and Overgrowth conflict at the edges of their territory, the Blackrock were pushed back across the broken terrain until only 3 outposts remained: the Foundry, the Docks, and the Depot. The commanders wisely split up to hit the docks and the depot simultaneously, while their greater forces encircled and prepared for the siege of the Foundry. Half the commanders charged the docks. This was the primary shipyard for the entire Iron Horde, where the remainder of their fleet was undergoing repair and retrofit, as Blackhand wanted his fleet back in fighting standard immediately. Unfortunately for Blackhand, he put Koromar in charge of the docks. The moment Koromar saw the commanders, he, rather than immediately sailing out with what ships he had, sat there and did nothing. After the commanders brought down the Warsong Fleshrender Nokgar, Koromar thought maybe he should at least fire upon the force from his command ship, but his reckless orders quickly left him without ammo and reliance upon mercenary retainers to stop them. The mercenaries weren't even a speed bump for the commanders, which you might think would worry Koromar, but no. Koromar thinks good, and instead let loose one of their captive Saberon, because that's going to work. It didn't work, and Koromar was first into combat, alongside the prize he valued so, the enslaved Skullock, son of Gruul. Skullock was at least sport for the commanders, but you know how these things go. The Iron Docks were shut down, and of course while this was happening, the other half charged the Grimrail Depot. The depot itself was well defended by some of Black Fuse's apprentices, including Rocket Spark, who did what they could, but could only delay the commanders, who quickly learned that one of the trains was heading out on the southern rail, and was equipped with an Iron Star cannon that was destined for the lost front of Shatrath, to cause whatever damage and havoc it could. Without hesitation, the commanders leapt on board the departing train, smashing through the artillery commander Nitrog Thunder Tower and devastating the train's forces. The Skylord Tavra, a Thunderlord survivor with mastery of Rylax, served as the final obstacle before the commanders were able to sabotage the train, destroying it entirely. Grimrail derailed, docks destroyed, outer defenses annihilated. It was time to descend into one of the best raids of the game, the Blackrock Foundry. We should pause a moment to emphasize this. The Warsong were the Iron Horde's upper caste, Grom and Garrosh ruled, but the real power behind the Iron Horde was Blackhand and Blackrock. The Iron Horde would not have the tech, the production capacity, the coordination, the bureaucracy, the arms, the armament, or anything actually required to run a large-scale organization without them. Thus, while much of the military might of the Iron Horde was spent, that which remained in the Foundry were the best of the best, and would prove engaging contest for experienced commanders. The first task was to shut down the smelter. The foundry's pallets contained ton after ton of blackrock ore, which, when properly treated, provided incredibly durable armor and arms. There they ran into the first irritant in the form of a giant Goron named Gorgrond, who was taking advantage of the invasion to do its namesake upon any untouched ore it could find. Nearby was the furnace's fuel intake, run by Gruul, father of the Gorgrond. We've discussed Gruul before, and his legend is no less impressive in this timeline, which is exactly why he was relegated to menial labor, to break both him and his Gorgrond sons. His death was his freedom, leaving the furnace itself. It should be mentioned that blackrock ore is notoriously difficult to smelt, and how the blackrock orcs had mastered it remained a secret for years. Herein the commanders unveiled the truth. A primal elemental, the heart of the mountain, chained and controlled with constant regulation and effort, and its abundant energies used to process the powerful ore. The commanders released the heart, though in its pain and fury it attacked them as well, forcing its destruction. With the furnace silent and the Blackrock's ability to process their namesake removed, it was time to deal with the manufactory. First they had to shut down the stamper, which was used to press processed ore into a malleable shape, overseen by the twin brothers Hansgar and Franzok. Past them, the most elite of the Burning Blade oversaw the molding of enchantment of essence into the Iron Horde weaponry, with Flamebender Kagraz at its head. Processed, stamped ore was also sent to the Thunderlord-enslaved Magneron, Kromog, who used his rune-enhanced brute strength to meld and mold the massive armor plates necessary for their war machines. Beastlord Darmok, one of the last Thunderlord survivors, was probably the most skilled of their number and was personally responsible for the taming and enslavement of the beasts within the foundry. Beyond both was the upper echelons of the organization, Operator Thogar and the Iron Maidens. Thogar was a brilliant coordinator, kept the various trains of the Iron Horde running, stocked, and on time. His removal would effectively destroy the Iron Horde's supply chain forever. The Iron Maidens were the highest-ranking military heads remaining, with Garon the admiral of the entire Iron Fleet. Their removal would effectively destroy the Iron Horde's leadership. The final challenge was Blackhand himself. Powerful warrior, ruthless tactician, burned by the elements. Given time, Blackhand could reforge the Iron Horde, and so his life was forfeit. Thus, within a matter of weeks, the Iron Horde was quite thoroughly defeated. Remember, this was an organized, militarized force, with advanced technology and coordinated infrastructure and wartime production, which had years of preparation time. How then could they have lost so thoroughly? This is the lesson Raytheon failed to learn in Pandaria. Azeroth, over the years since the Third War, had not grown weaker, but stronger. The unification of its varied and different people against common foe was something no force thus far had stood against. Humbled, Raytheon backed off from history's stage, and instead began to focus his attentions on those that corrupted his father, while Gul'dan stepped into the Iron Horde's broken corpse to claim his destiny.